and welcome to the Class of 2017 MacReads Convocation. I'm Ann Minnick, the Director of Academic Programs and a member of the committee that selected Mountains Beyond Mountains as the common reading for this year's incoming class. Before I introduce our presenters, I want to remind you of the reasons we chose this book and asked you to read it over the summer. A central feature of a liberal arts education is the developing the capacity to think critically, carefully, and compassionately about complex world problems. Global health concerns, such as those described in the book, are among the most urgent problems we currently face. We on the committee thought that Mountains Beyond Mountains brought to life in a compelling way the interdisciplinary nature of public health issues and underscored how important it is for all citizens to understand the complex interplay of forces involved in confronting social problems. It is now my pleasure to introduce two individuals who are committed to investigating and combating global health issues, as well as improving the lives of those affected by disease and poverty. Eric Carter received his PhD in geography from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and joined Mcallister last year after 5 years on the faculty at Grinnell. Eric is a medical geographer with a regional focus on Latin America. His geographical research takes an interdisciplinary approach, bridging the realms of international development, global health, and environmental studies. Joelle Vitiello received her PhD in French and Francophone studies, or perhaps it was just French at the time, from Stanford University and joined Mcallister in 1990. Her current research includes Haitian literature and culture, North African cinema and literature, and representations of systemic violence. Joelle has also become involved with humanitarian work in Haiti since the earthquake there in January of 2010. Please join me in welcoming Professors Carter and Vitiello.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. So thank you, Anne, for that really great introduction. I'm Eric Carter from the Geography Department, and I'm also affiliated with the Community and Global Health concentration here at Mcallister. And by way of introduction, I also wanted to mention that this fall we have a really important symposium coming up in October. It's our annual International Roundtable Symposium. This is a tradition at Mcallister that we do every single year. It's happening right before a family weekend, and this year's theme is Global Health, Promoting Equity Within and Across Borders. I'm one of the co-organizers of this symposium, along with Christine Hansen, the Dean of the Institute for Global Citizenship, and Devavani Chatterjee from the Biology Department. And we're currently working on putting together a really amazing and impressive schedule for the symposium. So please keep it on your radar screen. It happens around the 6th week of the semester. And a lot of the themes we'll be discussing in the symposium dovetail really nicely with the book that we'll be discussing today. So now I'm going to go ahead and begin. Paul Farmer is such an amazing person, and I want to be just like him. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people tell me this, or something like it over the years, especially young people, particularly my students. For the record, I think Paul Farmer is an amazing person too. And yet, while Paul Farmer's example is inspiring, I found it difficult and often painful to read Mountains Beyond Mountains. Partly this is because of how Tracy Kidder so unflinchingly depicts the suffering of people in rural Haiti. But for me at least, such misery was not the hardest thing to bear. Rather, because like Paul Farmer, I was also raised Catholic, I was transported, somewhat reluctantly, to my childhood encounters with the life of Christ and stories of the prophets, apostles, and saints. In a similar way, Paul Farmer's story made me feel as if my own life had so little meaning. After all, whose life did I save today? Whose life have I touched? What legacy will I leave? Who will remember me? Do I need to change? Why can't I be good? I don't think it's just my own neurosis that causes me to project such existential concerns onto Paul Farmer. He purposely fashions himself as a Christ-like figure, an extraordinary man, alone in the world, making extreme sacrifices to heal the sick. Like many Christian saints of yore, he doesn't eat much, he wanders the countryside on foot, and he doesn't change his clothes. He tends to be very sanctimonious, preaching. As Farmer himself puts it, People call me a saint, and I think I have to work harder because a saint would be a great thing to be. So as I read Mountains Beyond Mountains, I felt a growing sense of despair. First, about my own inadequacies of character and action compared to Paul Farmer, and then a deepening sense of guilt for being so self-centered that I would frame this inspiring story in terms of these inadequacies. Tracy Kidder sums up this kind of reaction with the term moral envy. As Kidder writes near the end of the book, quote, "Some people have read Mountains Beyond Mountains and said, in effect, damn, I wasted my life. I should have done what Paul Farmer's done." That's in the best cases. In the worst few cases I know about, readers seem to have thought, I'm going to get even with him for making me feel like a failure. And they've looked around for flaws, and when they haven't found any that are important, they've simply made them up. At the other extreme for moral envy, we can find the impulse to submit to Paul Farmer, to emulate him, and to become perhaps his disciple. At this point in your lives, I think many of you have this option. You might invest yourselves in saving the world in his manner. It's hard to do, but in theory at least, you could follow in his footsteps. You could study medicine, you could find donors, you could start an NGO or open a medical clinic. You could help a lot of people in that way. But to my mind, the hard part would not be the studying or the hours of work or the dizzying schedule or dealing with the miserable spectacle of the poor, the hungry, and the sick. The hardest part to me would be setting aside the rules of the world as we know it, which are predicated on our tendency to be concerned for our own selves above all else, and to somehow do what is right, rather than what is easy or expedient or efficient. To be like Paul Farmer would require a radical change of mindset, not just building a skill set. Is it reasonable to follow his path? Jim Kim, the other driving force behind Partners in Health, has one answer. Quote, "If Paul is the model, we're fucked. Let's celebrate him. Let's make sure people are inspired by him. But we can't say anybody should or could be just like him. If the poor have to wait for a lot of people like Paul to come along before they get good health care, they are totally fucked." And that's a quote. As we can see, Farmer, like many people who seem to serve a higher calling, is a tough act to follow. Thus is the dilemma of the disciple. How does an ordinary person follow the path of a saint? Although I've set up a comparison between Farmer and Christ, I want to emphasize that the problem is not particular to Christianity. Faithful people everywhere deal with this dilemma. The Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, Moses, and countless others serve as models of righteousness and wisdom. Even as we try to follow in their footsteps, their extraordinary natures underscore our own ordinariness, our imperfection. Every faith tries to deal with this dilemma of the disciple in its own way. But whether you are religious or secular or undecided, let's assume that you want to do good in the world, and you even want to do some things that Paul Farmer has done. But you know you can't be quite like him. Who will be your example? In the time that remains, I want to take the spotlight off Paul Farmer and instead reflect on the lives of three marginal characters from the book, using them as models for other ways of living ethically and intelligently in this world. Each one of these people represents a different realm of life. First, politics, which I define, perhaps somewhat charitably, as the art of bringing disparate groups together for a common purpose. Second, economics, which I boil down to how we make a living in the world. And third, the intellectual realm, or the life of the mind. Making an exception for the life of the mind, these are three realms of living that Farmer consistently subordinates to his principal vocation of delivering the best health care possible to the marginalized people of Haiti, Peru, and so many other places, what he calls the preferential option for the poor. I think you'll agree that Farmer tends to delegate the hard work of dealing with these often mundane aspects of life to other people. And so, I want to emphasize that Farmer's success comes from coordination and collaboration with his partners, not some solo effort. In other words, we all have a role to play in this world, and we can do good in many different ways. As depicted in Mountains Beyond Mountains, Jim Kim played a pivotal role bringing Partners in Health into the complex arena of international health policy. While Paul Farmer tends to prefer confrontation over compromise and maintaining ideological purity over negotiation, Jim Kim is willing to wade into the political fray. As he tells Farmer at one point, "Political work is interesting to me, and it has to be done." Tracy Kidder portrays Jim as Paul Farmer's loyal lieutenant, his sounding board, and the voice of reason. From time to time, they lock horns over tuberculosis policy and whether to make compromises with donors. Unfortunately, Jim, as the organization man, so to speak, may come across as less interesting and as less of a vital force than Paul Farmer. Even Farmer doesn't think enough of Jim to pick him up at the airport, as Kidder mentions several times. But by plugging away and navigating the difficult politics of global health, international development, and academia, Jim Kim has built a career that arguably makes him more influential than Farmer is today. After many years with Partners in Health, and then the WHO, Jim served as the president of Dartmouth College, and last year he became the president of the World Bank, one of the most powerful institutions on earth. The World Bank channels billions of dollars in aid and loans from wealthy countries to less developed countries, and to a large extent helps to set the agenda for international development policy. Jim's leadership promises to advance the cause of global health, a trend that Partners in Health helped to spark with their work starting in the 1980s. Now, the World Bank is a gigantic, slow-moving institution, and it's hard to say how much Jim has already changed its policies. But surely, if we feel that improving the lives of the world's poor is a priority, isn't it better to have someone like Jim Kim on the inside, even if he must constantly negotiate, bargain, and compromise? Paul Farmer has a distaste for compromise. He also seems indifferent to money. More precisely, he thinks that money should be no object in providing care. That is, the poor and the rich alike are deserving of the same level of care. In a nutshell, that is his preferential option for the poor, a philosophy that defies the utilitarian, efficiency-based principles at the heart of most public health policy. In the world of public health, policymakers live under conditions of scarce resources and budgets and strive to get the most bang for the buck. Farmer disregards this logic and seemingly all financial reality in the way he seeks to provide care for the poor. In one of the book's most memorable stories, the young Haitian boy, John, is airlifted to the US for a cancer treatment that comes too late to save him, at a cost of tens of thousands of dollars. This is a poignant and challenging example of Farmer's principles taken to their logical end. Was the cost of trying to save this one child worth it? Could the same money have been spent to save dozens of other children with less expensive problems? Paul Farmer can be somewhat unconcerned about money, thanks in large part to the action of Tom White, the Boston philanthropist who provided the seed money and a steady stream of income for Partners in Health. White, who died at the age of 90 in 2011, reportedly gave away $75 million of his own money during his lifetime. He himself was not born into wealth, but rather built his fortune as a capitalist in the construction industry. There's an irony here. While global capitalism creates the unequal world that Farmer is trying to transform through his work, Farmer's own mission could not be sustained without Tom White's life work of managing, investing, and building enterprise in the private sector. White is not the only capitalist behind the scenes of Partners in Health. Later, they come to depend on the philanthropy of the very famous Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, created by one of the wealthiest men in the world, a man whose net worth, around $50 billion, is approximately 7 times the GNP or national income of all of Haiti, which has 10 million people. So, Tom White and Bill Gates represent another path to take, that of the socially conscious capitalist. But while such philanthropic efforts seek to solve specific problems in a decisive way, the relationship between global capitalism and social development is much more complicated. Capitalism can build fortunes that allow for huge philanthropic ventures. But as needy as they are, should the poor of Haiti be consigned to be the objects of charity forever? Or does Haiti need political and social change that allows for more broad-based economic development? On the other hand, while Farmer tends to portray Haiti as a victim of global economic forces, we could also make the argument that globalization has, on the whole, been good for the world's poor. Arguably, the most globalized of developing countries, such as China, have managed to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and ill health over the last few decades, not so much through acts of charity or through development aid, but with capital investment and industrial production. In his own strategy for healthcare, Paul Farmer recognizes that the poor need more than medicine. They need food, shelter, jobs, income. How to make these things possible and to make these opportunities widely available and grow sustainable, these are not simple questions. My last alternative model for living a good life requires me to violate my premise a little bit. Here the figure I'm referring to is another side of Paul Farmer himself, which he expresses through his academic work, thus modeling for us the intellectual life, or the life of the mind. Most people encounter Paul Farmer for the first time through the book you've read, Mountains Beyond Mountains, or through his activism and his leadership of Partners in Health. I first came to know Farmer through his academic writing, books such as AIDS and Accusation or Pathologies of Power. When I came to find out that Farmer possessed not only an MD, but also a PhD in anthropology, and that he could write important, well-received books while also attending to Partners in Health in several different countries, along with working in one of the leading teaching hospitals in the US, well, this inspired in me not moral envy, but just ordinary, run-of-the-mill professional envy. But in all honesty, his academic work deserves all the accolades it has received. And that work in itself has helped to initiate important conversations that alter certain paradigms in the world of international health. In other words, his ideas are influential. Kidder makes mention of Farmer's writing, but it is not central to the narrative. Readers are more likely to, quote, form an impression of Farmer as a maverick medic invested in a messianic mission of saving everyone he personally touches, as the geographer Matthew Spark has written. Indeed, many of the bureaucrats at the WHO and other influential institutions are initially dismissive of Farmer due to his status as mere clinician. For a clinician, the patient standing in front of him or her is the most important person in the world, and no effort should be spared to save that patient. Farmer, his critics say, fails to see the big picture by ignoring the financial challenges of providing care to the world's poor. This judgment is unfair. Farmer, through his academic work, has demonstrated time and again a penetrating and far-ranging analysis of the causes of global inequalities in health. His contributions are numerous. As reflected in the work of Partners in Health on the ground, Farmer has insisted on an approach to healthcare that transcends the merely biological aspects of disease and instead accounts for the social causes of ill health. As Farmer makes clear time and again, poverty and marginalization and powerlessness are just as much causes of tuberculosis or HIV/AIDS as a bacterium or a virus. In dialogue with other anthropologists, Farmer has developed a theory of structural violence, a kind of violence that works through social hierarchies and global circuits of power to limit people's life chances and destroy their health, but without requiring any overt acts of physical violence or oppression. As discussed in Mountains Beyond Mountains, the mechanisms of structural violence are political and sometimes even well-intentioned, ranging from the dam project on the Artibonite River to the International Monetary Fund structural adjustment policies, which in the 1980s and 1990s compelled many developing countries to take a step backwards in providing health care to their citizens. It's fair to ask why Paul Farmer would even bother engaging with the world of academic scholarship. He doesn't need to publish critical social science research to sustain and promote Partners in Health. But I think that Paul Farmer wants to subject his ideas to some test of reasonableness, of logical rigor, and also to show that Haiti or Peru or Rwanda are just instances of much more general global scale processes. He wants to break down those walls that put theory here and practice there, and he wants to make the world of medicine more attentive to politics. And I think he needs to theorize, analyze, and to write to make sense of the world. Through such intellectual engagements, Farmer, who is a religious man, but also a scientist, frees himself of dogma and orthodoxy. At Mcallister, I hope you'll embrace and try to balance all of these examples for living in an ethical, intelligent, and engaged way. I hope you'll see the virtues of the life of the mind, the necessity of disconnecting sometimes to find your own version of Farmer's mountaintop retreat, a place to observe, to contemplate, and to analyze. I hope, like Jim Kim, you'll understand that reasonable people will disagree, that resources are limited, and that allies are necessary to getting things done. In short, I hope you'll be politically engaged. And like Tom White, I hope you'll realize that no matter what line of work you go into, money itself is neither good nor bad, but the choice of putting it to ethically good or bad uses is ours to make. Lastly, you'll recognize soon enough that there are no saints here at Mcallister. And just as importantly, no particular idea or philosophy is sacred. It's up to you to find your own path towards an ethical, intelligent, and engaged way of living. So, welcome to Mcallister.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon and welcome to Macalester. It's a great pleasure to meet you for a discussion of Tracy Kidder's about the life, the ideas and the actions of Paul Farmer. Since I teach and write about literature, I will start with a couple of remarks about the book that I hope will be helpful in your small group discussions. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that in Mountains Beyond Mountains, we have a portrayal of Paul Farmer according to the author and narrator Tracy Kidder. So Paul Farmer is a character in Tracy Kidder's narrative, a narrative in which the author himself is also a character. The book is the journey of Tracy Kidder learning about Farmer's own journey, from being a little boy living in a trailer to the international global health leader and practitioner he is today. Throughout the book, what Kidder learns about his main character mirrors Paul Farmer's learning about Haiti and how to provide access to provide the best health care access to the most marginalized people he meets there. Farmer has to go to their world and recognize the dignity of their lives. The stunning fact of his learning experience is that, like Farmer, Kidder learns that the standard of care should be the same for rural Haitians as it is for the wealthiest patients in Western countries. Just as Haiti challenged Farmer's sense of social justice, Farmer challenged Kidder to open his mind to his ideas. In order to learn about his character, Kidder had to walk up steep mountains and cross a huge dam and literally stretch his physical abilities to the point that he became a patient of Paul Farmer. He learned about Farmer by observation and by acting, traveling to Haiti, meeting Farmer's patients and collaborators. Observation and study, as well as doing, go together in the learning process for both of them, and that's a precious lesson for us as readers. Farmer himself, after going to Haiti for the first time, studied the language and the rich culture of Haiti before becoming a doctor, and returning to Haiti with skills that he turned not just into medical skills, but into action and tools to make a difference in the everyday life of rural Haitians who, until he worked at Zami La Santé, had no access to medical care at all. In the book, you see Kidder both resist and challenge his character and be challenged by him as well. He both admires and resents him at times, and uses several literary hooks to lead his readers through the complexities of farmer changing the way the world approaches health issues. When Kidder visited Macalester in October 2006, he mentioned in a conversation that when he received the letter that Ophelia Down had written to Farmer to turn down Farmer's marriage proposal, he knew he had a book. I understood this to mean that Kidder did not want to write the life of a saint, but rather the life of a flawed human being embroiled in all the conflicts and trade-offs that Farmer's choices entail. Ophelia's letter made the book possible for Kidder, in part because it shows the conflicts that can arise around such a personality as Farmer. In terms of literature, it makes the book more profound because it does not show Farmer solely as a hero. That leads me to another point, as we wonder both whether we want to emulate Paul Farmer, and if we do, how do we do this? What are the sacrifices, and who makes the sacrifices? By turning Paul Farmer down, Ophelia refuses to sacrifice her emotional well-being in the long term. She is basically saying to him that she won't accept to come second after Haiti, that she too wants, that she needs and wants more than he can give to her. She is on his side. She loves Haiti, she wants to make the world a better place as well, and she knows he will not sacrifice his dedication for a comfortable domestic life. So she gives us an insight into Farmer's world. He is doing exactly what he wants to be doing. If someone is going to make a sacrifice, it will be his loved ones and his close associates. So she opts out while remaining a dedicated friend and supporter, and she has steered Partners in Health into a very well-known, very well-funded, and very well-recognized institution as its executive director. And they are both now happily married with families, not with each other. As a scholar of Haitian culture and literature, I mostly consider myself a perpetual student of Haiti. I do find it easy to admire Farmer's dedication to a country that is usually depicted as, quote-unquote, the poorest country of our hemisphere, or as a country overwhelmed with political violence, where people believe in zombies and other negative imagery. When I introduce Haiti to people, I usually speak of the riches of Haiti. And I mean not just the cultural richness, but we also tend to forget that Haiti was the richest, was economically the richest colony in Europe in the 18th century. We know Haiti today as a nation devastated by deforestation, an earthquake with unimaginable consequences for the daily life of the most impoverished Haitians in the region of the capital, Port-au-Prince, a nation plagued by violent hurricanes and regular coups d'etat. We often forget that when Haiti became a nation in 1804, after freeing itself from slavery, the only nation to do so, the island had been the biggest source of wealth for France and some of Europe. It sustained more than 50% of the French economy at the time and accounted for 40% of France's foreign trade. And we're talking about the time of Voltaire and Rousseau and the Enlightenment. For example, when we think of the French Riviera, we think of beautiful beaches, but the town of Marseille had about 14 sugar refineries then, and most of the coast of France was the same. The wealth of French culture at the time was supported by the slave labor in Haiti, and Paul Farmer described Haitian history very eloquently in his own book called The Uses of Haiti. At the time of the Haitian Revolution, many European journalists and writers saw the Haitian Revolution as the fulfillment of the goals of the French and American revolutions. But Haiti paid a high price for freeing itself. It was cordoned off by all of the nations, and in order to be officially recognized by France, it had to buy its independence by paying back a huge amount of money for over 100 years at very high interest to compensate the planters who had lost their slaves. These constraints diminished the ability of Haiti to develop its resources, and international trade agreements eventually contributed to destroy its agriculture and farm industries. But even though Haiti became impoverished over time, it has remained rich culturally, whether we talk about its painting, its literature, sculpture, music that's recognized worldwide, or spirituality. Creativity is everywhere. In a nation where we are told that the vast majority does not know how to read and write, Haiti has an impressive number of writers, and I mean excellent writers. Even in the Twin Cities, where the Haitian diaspora is not very big, we do have 4 Haitian women writers, 4 exceptional women. I'm privileged that my discipline includes Haitian literature and culture. So Farmer was very well aware of Haiti's riches when he went there for the first time, even though Haiti had a bad international image. He went to Haiti in 1983 at the height of the AIDS panic, when many people falsely believed that AIDS originated in Haiti, and in a country that was still living under the dictatorship of the Duvalier family, a dictatorship that ended in 1986. Farmer became close to Jean-Bertrand Aristide, a Salesian priest also influenced by liberation theology, who was the first democratically elected president of Haiti in 1990. They both shared the common goal of eradicating poverty for the most vulnerable Haitian citizens, and the understanding that the poorest are also full human beings with their dignity. Even with his unconventional family background, Farmer remains a privileged person, attending the best schools and meeting powerful people. What distinguishes him in the world of non-governmental agencies is that very early on, he saw that the local population needed to be included in his projects, not just as passive patients, but also as active doctors, nurses, administrators, and generally people with skills and talent. And Partners in Health has trained a large number of Haitians ever since Farmer started to work with Zami La Santé in 1989, and he has been working in concert with local authorities ever since. As early as 1983, when he was in Haiti as a cultural anthropologist, staying with a Haitian family, he came to see Haitians as his equals, engaging wholly and full-time with them. He learned the language, but he also located himself in a coeval time with them. That means in the same time as them. In other words, he was not coming from a space of modernity to a backward place. He saw no difference between his temporality and theirs, and thus could engage in conversation with them as equals. His insistence that everyone deserves the same quality of health care anywhere on the planet is unique in the world of NGOs. This perception was a breakthrough at the time. Apparently it came from his background in liberation theology, his ability to position himself in solidarity with people without such access, his imagination, and his willingness to integrate into another culture and speak another language. This helped him go beyond being just a doctor and transform the field of medicine by linking it with culture, food, and environment in general. His fidelity over the long haul to his principles and to the population he works with is another exceptional trait. Between 1983, when he first went to Haiti, and March 2013, when Partners in Health opened officially the University Hospital of Mirabelais, a first-class hospital and medical campus, Farmer has had 30 years of sustained engagement with the Haitians from the Central Plateau. Since Kidder's book was published, Paul Farmer has become even more famous. He has developed more programs in the world, in Rwanda, for instance, where his family lives and where his wife works in a hospital in partnership with the government of Rwanda. He also works in the US with the Navajo Nation. His fame and good work have also brought him into more delicate situations. By agreeing to become deputy to former President Bill Clinton, who is the United Nations Special Envoy to Haiti, he has entered a zone of powerful international actors where his principles have been more difficult to maintain. But he does remain, however, a close friend of deposed President Aristide, who came back to Haiti in 2011. Farmer sits on the board of the Aristide Foundation, and the first Haitian doctors, and we're talking about 50 doctors, who went to work for Partners in Health the very day after the earthquake in January 2010, were trained at the Aristide Foundation Medical Center. As for Tracy Kidder, he has written several new books, including one generated from farmers' work in Rwanda. And eventually, in spite of his moral envy, he was won over by Paul Farmer, and now sits on the board of trustees of Partners in Health. As Kidder points out in his book, it's not easy to emulate Paul Farmer, not even easy to accompany him. But Farmer knows that even small steps taken to accompany the less privileged in any capacity are steps worth taking. I happened to be in Haiti when the earthquake occurred, and I was very lucky to be in an old wooden hotel that bent but did not break. My companions there happened to be trauma surgeons, some French, some American, who went to work in whatever makeshift hospital we could find for them right away. For those of us who did not have medical skills, it was very difficult to accept taking very small steps in helping and supporting in any fashion possible. Medical skills were very important, but there are many other skills and fields that can make a difference. I have been struck by that what is the most significant in farmers' philosophy is the global health environment of people, not just their medical condition. This thinking beyond an apparent symptom also motivates workers in Haiti in many fields, and I'll give you a few examples from different fields. Anne Hastings, who was a financial advisor in Manhattan, took a break from the financial world and came to live in Haiti for 1 year in the mid-90s, and she stayed behind to develop, in collaboration with a Haitian priest, an alternative bank that would support modest Haitian communities. It became known as Francophone, the Bank of the People, or Haiti's alternative bank for the organized poor. It started modestly, and now it is Haiti's leading microfinance institution with a board of directors composed of Haitian citizens. It looked at poverty very much like Farmer looked at medicine, taking all kinds of factors into account besides economics. The Bureau of International Lawyers, along with the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, works with grassroots organizations and led the first human rights trial in Haiti in 2000. They now work with rape victims in post-earthquake camps and with the families of victims of the Duvalier regime, as well as with victims of a cholera epidemic that was brought into Haiti a few months after the earthquake. Mario Joseph of the Bureau of International Lawyers and Brian Concanon of the Institute for Justice and Democracy, who also happens to be in Boston, have been called the Paul Farmers of human rights. Closer to your age, a Stanford graduate, Sasha Kramer, studied ecology and founded the organization Soil in 2006. She works alongside Haitians to transform waste including human waste, into resources in Haiti. It is not particularly glamorous, but Soil's philosophy that Sasha Kramer calls ecology liberation instead of theology liberation, the philosophical roots of waste transformation, was particularly useful and practical after the earthquake, when Kramer provided latrines adapted to the situation to thousands of internally displaced persons. And Farmer has adopted her model, by the way, of the Central Plateau. She approaches poverty from the angle of agriculture, soil renewal, public health, agricultural productivity, and environmental destruction. She works on recycling waste into fertilizer, developing sustainable sanitation, and reducing cholera impact. And Paul Farmer sits on the board of directors as well. I think it's important at this point to also say that Haitians help each other, and that one form of potential engagement is simply to support them and stand in solidarity with them. For several years when I went to Haiti, I worked with writers and artists, but also along 2 French nurses who were accompanying kids who lived in bands in the streets, and especially bands of young girls. Anne-Marie and Louise worked with a Haitian sociologist who had come back from exile after the departure of the Duvalier family, and the sociologist had opened a center to provide activities for the kids during the day. He literally donated everything he had to help the children have a better future, and the team worked with Haitian teachers and with Haitian artists who donated their time to train the children to develop some skills so they would have a better future. More recently, when I returned to Haiti after the earthquake, I gave a series of seminars to a large group of Haitian students with different backgrounds, and I worked alongside a group of Haitian youth who was particularly talented and active. They had all been traumatized by the earthquake. They had lost family members, they had lost friends, and some of them had had broken limbs. They eventually found their way to the Aristide Foundation and were trained by a Haitian American psychologist to help with relieving mental health issues in the post-earthquake camps for displaced persons. They went to 3 different camps 3 times a week, and they were still very faithful to their tasks more than a year after the earthquake, and they are still going to the camps 3 times a week, training people to be less anxious and to overcome their trauma and the difficulties in their daily life. Their solidarity was exemplary. It was generous, it was not fussy, but it was an effective and faithful engagement with their own communities. And when I go to Haiti, I meet many more groups of Haitians and some individuals who are also doing everything they can in their spare time to help others have a better, healthier life. So there are many ways to contribute. As a teacher, when I am there, I teach, I educate, I study, I share my resources, and those are very baby steps, but it's some form of engagement. I don't know all of you, of course, but I've been very impressed so far by the young men and women from your class whose files I have read. From building schools in Uganda to working with inner city kids in the US, you have collectively already made the world a better place. And you have chosen the right place to continue developing your skills and opportunities to be engaged, whether you study global health or take courses in history, languages, philosophy, which will enable you to question your own assumptions and do better work. Like Eric at Macalester, I hope you will discover your own ways of being engaged in the life of a mind, and in civic life as citizens of the world, locally, nationally, or internationally. I wish for you to be curious and follow your questions and passions, and to keep studying, self-reflecting, doubting, and acting. Learning and doing are often inseparable, as we often learn by doing, and we often become engaged in a project by learning. So, welcome to Macalester, and in Creole, bienvenue à Macalester.
Can you hear me? There we go. We have a little bit of time for questions, but first I'd like to formally thank both Joelle and Eric for their presentations. Any questions out there for our professors? Yes? So the question was, after the earthquake, what did Partners in Health do?
Well, they had a small clinic already in Port-au-Prince, and they just rallied around it and worked with other doctors. They worked with Cuban doctors who were already in the country and who had actually trained Haitians to become doctors in Cuba, and they had brought some of them back to Haiti. And they also worked with doctors who had been trained by the Aristide Foundation, but they went to work immediately. Partners in Health, Doctors Without Borders. There were a few hospitals that were not completely destroyed, small clinics, and so they went to work right away. Like 2 hours after the earthquake, they were working.
Other questions? questions? Yes? How did Cuba get involved with the issue?
Okay, I'm not sure I know the whole history, but Cuba has had a long-term relationship with Haiti, and especially during the presidency, the last presidency of Aristide from 2000. Let me see, it was like 2000. To 2004, and we left, so 2003, he was president, and his foundation had a campus, and they were training people to be doctors, and because there are not many doctors that had training to train doctors, they worked with Cuba, who sent, Cuba has a large medical university, and so they sent many doctors from Cuba to Haiti, and they were actually all over the countries to treat people, but also to teach people the art of medicine. Now, when the second coup against President Aristide happened in February 2004, the hospital was closed, and Cuban doctors went to the countryside because they had no other facility to work with, and but they remained in the country to help as much as they could. And right after the earthquake, Cuba, like many countries, like Dominican Republic, Ecuador, many countries participated and sent doctors to Haiti. So they actually, in the 2 or 3 days after the earthquake, they sent about 700 doctors, not all Cuban, but doctors from all over the world who had been trained by their universities, including a huge delegation of Haitian doctors who went back.
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your lecture. It was actually really informative. I remember Mr. Carter, in some point in your speech, you mentioned about sustainability, and you gave the example of the boy John, right? And I was actually thinking about it while I was reading it because I did econ, and so I had that, well, I would say paradigm already set in my mind, and there's another perspective of being a clinician, and I wanted to know what you guys would do if you were in Paul Farmer's shoes and you were looking at the issue from a clinician's perspective that you have to treat your patient, but at the same time you have to look at the scarce resources in the world and make decisions according to the cost. What would you do if you were in his shoes?
Yeah, that's just a softball question for you.
I mean, first of all, it's one of the most drawn out stories in the whole book, right? I think in part because it is so complicated. The ethical questions at stake are so complicated. To me, it feels like everything in the book is leading up to that one story, and this is sort of like the proof of his philosophy. I'll give you my answer. I bet you that you guys will be discussing this in your sessions afterwards. I mean, I don't know if anybody out there give me guidance on this, because I don't know, like, this seems like one of the questions that might come up. I think what happened in that situation was it wasn't Paul Farmer himself who was in charge of the situation, if you remember. It was some of his assistants, and I think that they discussed openly what they thought about it, and afterwards, and that they were actually caught up trying to figure out what Paul Farmer would do. Do you remember this? And they were actually trying to project their own analysis through his eyes, right? And they weren't looking at it kind of in a sort of objective fashion all the time. But I think that's the nature of the clinician's work, right? And that's why I can't speak to that. I mean, I'm an academic, and I'm not a doctor, and no one's ever been in front of me with a life-saving situation. And that's one of the reasons that I had this reading of the book that made me feel like, I had never had that emergency situation where I could save someone's life. Having said all of that, I don't think that I would have made the decision they made to airlift the boy. I mean, if you want to ask me what I would have done, I was just like, I was involved. In hindsight, it was 2020 and it happened a very long time ago, and I'm totally removed from it. But it seems like with those tens of thousands of dollars that went into that one boy's treatment, that money could have been spent elsewhere, right? And there's one other thing I like to say about that, and maybe you guys can discuss this in your session. When Tracy Kidder confronts Paul Farmer about this, I don't know if you remember this, it's kind of near the end of the book, so maybe you guys don't get to this story, but it's after page 300, so it's kind of late in the book. But when Tracy Kidder and Paul Farmer are on this very long walk towards the end of the book, Kidder confronts Farmer and says, why did you guys make that decision? And Farmer says something that I thought was very surprising. He said, look, he says something to this effect, doctors in the United States make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why don't they take some of their own money and pay for this child to be airlifted, right? And I think that that's actually, maybe he was speaking off the cuff and sort of impromptu, but I think that's an ethically incoherent statement to make, right? I mean, because you have to ask yourselves, what responsibility do you have towards total strangers, right? So for example, if there was a total stranger to you and that person was in immediate distress in this room, was having a heart attack or something, of course you have an ethical obligation to seek assistance or assist that stranger directly. But if a total stranger comes up to you on the street and says, give me $10,000 because I really, really need it, how many of you would really just say, sure, here's $10,000, or let me write you a check, right? So I felt like that was sort of an irresponsible thing to say. And that even though in the long term, we can try to change the world so that it's more equitable, when it comes to the decisions that individuals make, there's a different ethical calculus that takes place. I hope you understand my meaning on that. And I'm sure you'll discuss it extensively in your groups.
Do you want to comment on that, Joelle, what you would do, or? No. Okay. Good choice. Yes.
I was just wondering, due to the, as far as I understand it, sort of the state between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, if there are any medical treaties between those two countries, or like during the earthquake, Dominican, I believe it's the Dominican Republic which shares the island. Did they do anything in response to the earthquake medically?
Did you hear the question, Joelle? No.
Due to the past between I believe it's the Dominican Republic and Haiti, both share the same island. Was there any sort of medical help the Dominican Republic gave to Haiti, or do the two countries not associate with each other due to that past?
Well, after the earthquake, there was great solidarity between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. For one thing, they opened their borders because no plane could land for several days at the airport in Port-au-Prince, so people had to go to the Dominican Republic and then enter through the Dominican Republic to go into the country. That's also where a lot of people were evacuated in the Dominican Republic. So they opened their borders and they sent teams as well, and there is great collaborations for at least for a few months until things settle down.
Maybe one more question.
So you made a quick comparison between the Farmer and Price, and I was thinking more about a story about the Russian prisoners. Not-to-be is like critical problems in prisons, and I was wondering, because Jesus Christ is kind of associated with the lower class people who are normally not really taken care of, why do you think so little time was spent in the book on the Russian prisoners?
I'm not sure. So the question was, why is so little time in the book spent on the Russian prisoners? Because it's a really good example and a really good case study. And he actually Farmer himself talks about this a lot in his book, Pathologies of Power. So he develops that case study a lot more. my guess is that Tracy Kidder was trying to aim for a little bit of kind of narrative coherence, right? I mean, it's a very sprawling story if you get into all of Paul Farmer. Like, you see Paul Farmer traveling around the world, and it gets kind of overwhelming sometimes, like how he can be in so many different places at once, or how he can be in France one day, then Russia the next day, then Rwanda, then Haiti, then Peru. It's just a frequent flyer miles alone. Not just something I envy. There's that envy again. I think that that's the main reason it was left out. I don't think it's anything because Paul Farmer doesn't pay attention to it or he thinks it's any less worthy of a case, but I just think it would have made the narrative too sprawling and overstretched. That's my opinion, but I'm not too sure about that. I don't know, Joelle agrees.
Well, I think on that note of agreement, we should end. And again, thank you for your comments today, and good luck with your discussion.